Mr. Weng.
Mr. Speaker, sir, regular access to reliable and secure EV charging points is a concern for many EV drivers. Introducing and expanding a new infrastructure is always a significant undertaking. But laying a strong foundation early promotes certainty and stability amongst stakeholders and users. It will help our drivers to use cleaner energy and meet Singapore's sustainability targets in the long run. I have suggestions and clarifications in 4 areas. First, Mr. Speaker, sir, are the proposed minimum number of charging points adequate? Singapore plans to phase out petrol vehicles and only allows registration of EVs from 2030 onwards. As such, we need to beef up the number of charging points across the island. However, the bill proposes a relatively small number of all parking spaces in the development to have charging points. Would this conservative number of mandated available charging points move the needle? Would this encourage higher EV adoption in the near future? Can we not afford to have more ambitious targets? I understand that there is an ongoing study to determine what will encourage Singaporeans to adopt EVs. The results are slated to be released in the second quarter of 2023. I look forward to reading it. In the meantime, many of my residents are already concerned about the adequacy of charging points. I note that we have a target of 60,000 EV charging points by 2030. How does this translate to the ratio of charging spaces to the number of EVs? We should establish a national EV adoption or conversion rate target. This would better guide us to determine the adequacy of charging points. Furthermore, while the spotlight has been on personal cars, electric forms of commercial vehicles are also becoming popular, like lorries and buses. An example is a new ride-sharing service next year that allows SMEs to rent electric vans at 20 locations across Singapore. All this is good news for our sustainability targets and should be encouraged. Are these new developments and increased demands for EV charging factored into our targets? Second, Mr. Speaker, sir, human behavioral issues could undermine the actual availability of charging points. I'm aware of complaints about EVs hogging charging points when they are fully charged or not charging. Likewise, there are non-EVs that misuse the parking lots designated for EVs. LTA explained that EVs generally only have to be charged once every 5 to 7 days. This was one of the factors taken into account for setting the target quota. Even so, it would be idealistic to assume that users would by default seek out consensus or compromise on a schedule to use the charging points on different days. Moreover, does the target number of charging points take into consideration the prevalence of private hire vehicles and the high mileage that would be clocked by private hire vehicles? As we work on expanding the infrastructure, can we look into enforcing appropriate parking? Are there deterrent measures or penalties for drivers who park erroneously in lots reserved for EVs? This brings to mind the fines imposed on those who park at designated disabled parking lots. Can we do more to formalize codes of conduct to encourage considerate behavior for EV charging? Legislation will also not be enough in this case. Active ground enforcement would be correspondingly needed. Third, Mr. Speaker, sir, what are the plans to mandate EV charging at existing developments with no upgrading plans? To promote nationwide adoption, our EV infrastructure must be comprehensive. Can the Ministry clarify what is the projected percentage of buildings in Singapore that would have to comply with mandated provision of EV chargers? With the ongoing high interest rate environment, there's the likelihood that many developments have suspended plans for upgrading works. As such, how effective will the requirements to increase EV charging facilities be during this period, where plans to upgrade are likely to be suspended? Additionally, many people go to work in such buildings. Instead of charging their vehicles at work, they will have to compete with their neighbours back home for the limited charging lots. Worse still, they may leave their cars to charge in the residential car park and hog the lot while at work. This may present a missed opportunity towards the adoption of EV vehicles due to the reluctance of building owners to create more charging infrastructure due to the current prohibitive costs. I'm glad that LTA has reduced the percentage of votes required at the general meeting for MCST or strata title developments to pass EV-related resolutions. Will the government monitor the installation rates of EV charging points in strata title developments? For developments that consistently refuse to install EV charging points, will efforts be made to engage them and address their concerns? We are looking at the potential exclusion of a significant number of drivers if strata-titled residential buildings deny their residents of EV charging lots. Concomitantly, I would like to ask the government to consider providing additional support or subsidies for brownfield sites. Building a new EV charging station on brownfield sites presents many challenges, and these are additional requirements imposed on them. Mr. Speaker, sir, my last clarification is on ensuring fair competition and sustainability of EV charging providers. There are about 22 EV charger operators as of July 2022. Out of the list, slightly fewer than 10 are major players. The rest are smaller providers, with some providing EV charging as a side business. How do we ensure that amongst providers there is healthy competition? On the other hand, how do we avoid the problem of having too many small players and the risk of a fragmented market? From the point of view of EV consumers, there is the concern that a small-scale provider secures the right to provide charging points at their residence, then exits the market prematurely when the business becomes unsustainable. The user would then face supply disruption. We have already seen a similar situation with our energy market. Will it be like our energy market when SP steps in to replace a provider that has exited the market? In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, sir, COP27 has just recently concluded in Egypt. We are at a crossroads today. We are just coming out of a pandemic, with the Ukraine war and geopolitical uncertainties causing inflationary pressures, as well as disruptions in energy supplies. There's a risk that nations focus on the pressing issues of the day but lose sight of the climate and energy crisis facing the planet. As such, Singapore must play our part. We must take the long-term view, focus on the clean energy transition, and give due attention to the existential crisis of our generation. We must act in time. The adoption of EVs is important for us to meet our sustainability commitments. For EVs to be successful, the infrastructure must be laid out right. We must be bold and ambitious with our targets to evoke significant change in attitudes towards transportation. Singapore must always be one step ahead with our planning to meet future needs and demands in the EV landscape. As part of the steward pillar in our Forward Singapore conversations, we must also continue to engage our residents on how Singapore can do better in environmental sustainability, as well as grow our partnerships for a green, livable, and climate-resistant Singapore. I support the bill. Thank you.
Order. I propose to take a break now. Suspend the sitting and we'll take the chair at 15:35 p.m. Order.